simply because he believed his wife no longer loved him. He used work as an excuse to get close to a new female colleague, dropping subtle, flirtatious hints through suggestive gestures. Just as he had hoped, their relationship eventually crossed a line.
You were swell.
But it wouldn't be long before he began to regret everything he'd done. When Frank returned home pretending nothing had happened, he was caught off guard. His wife had not only dressed up specially, but had also secretly planned a warm and heartfelt birthday party for him.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Daddy. Happy birthday to you.
The sudden display of affection touched Frank deeply, bringing tears to his eyes. But it also filled him with guilt and remorse for his earlier impulsiveness. At 30, with a house, a car, and kids, he realized he should be cherishing the life he already had, instead of chasing after fleeting excitement and empty thrills. After a period of quiet and serious reflection, he made a decision. He would make up for his mistakes with real action. So the next day, when Maureen eagerly reached out to him again, he didn't hesitate to say no. Instead, he rushed to the theater to pick up his wife. But April was no longer the gentle, affectionate woman she had been the night before. During her carefully prepared stage performance, the audience's indifference had left her heartbroken. Perhaps Frank had already sensed April's disappointment, which is why he chose to be attentive to her emotions, offering her comfort and encouragement throughout the ride home. He even expressed regret that she had to share the stage with a group of amateurs, but April took his honest words as sarcasm and accused him of talking too much. Seeing that April's mood hadn't improved, Frank pulled the car over, trying to give her a warm hug. But to his surprise, her emotions exploded. After a moment of silence, Frank's long-suppressed frustrations burst out. He couldn't understand why his wife always seemed to pick fights over nothing and blamed others for her lack of success in her acting career. In his view, her poor acting had nothing to do with him, and she should have walked away from that dead-end stage a long time ago. Every word hit hard, cutting deep. Like pouring fuel on a fire, his comments only made April feel worse. Enraged, she threw open the car door and ran out without looking back. Worried for her safety, Frank chased after her, hoping they could both calm down and return to the car to talk things through.
Haven't I made it clear I don't particularly want to talk about it?
He was done putting up with her coldness. He could no longer hold back his emotions and finally let out all the frustration he had been bottling up inside.
You're sick. I really mean that. You're sick.
You think you can bully me into feeling whatever you want me to feel?
In a trap.
Yes,
You
yes.
in a trap.
Me,
Jesus
Frank.
Christ.
Me.
Don't make me laugh.
Pathetic, self-deluded little boy. Look at you and tell me how by any stretch of the imagination you can call yourself a man.
After a storm of shouting and tears, they eventually got back in the car, settling into a brief silence. But deep down, they both knew. This wasn't their first fight, and it wouldn't be the last. Like most couples, falling in love happens in a moment. But spending a lifetime together is a test of time and patience. Right now, any compromise they made was more about the kids than love. The next morning, Frank returned to his dull 9-to-5 routine, just like always. But right before he got in the car, he couldn't help but glance back at the home that once held so much hope. His eyes were filled with confusion and doubt. It was as if he was asking himself, had he grown attached to this home, or had he simply lost all desire to return? He thought back to the moment he met April on a cruise ship. The spark, the romance, it all felt like yesterday, and yet everything had changed. The passion they once shared had been washed away by the waves of reality, leaving only chaos and exhaustion in its wake. Oddly enough, it was Maureen, the one who showed interest in him, who now seemed to truly understand his pain and longing. In the haze of frustration and dissatisfaction, Frank's emotional compass began to shift toward Maureen. At the dinner table, he found a willing listener. He opened up to her, sharing stories of his past glories and achievements, bringing those memories back to life. Maureen, still young and inexperienced, listened quietly with admiration in her eyes. That gaze of awe made Frank feel seen again, understood, valued. He was intoxicated by it. In contrast, April had sacrificed so much for the family, from the vibrant years of her youth to the endless chores of daily life. She bore it all in silence, never once complaining. But she also knew that these sacrifices could never be used as an excuse to start a fight. A happy marriage required mutual understanding, patience, and respect, not one-sided sacrifice and resentment. So she chose to respect Frank's wishes, letting go of the acting dream that once burned so brightly, but now felt painfully out of reach. She devoted herself entirely to her family, using her warmth and dedication to build a stable home. In the midst of her busy days, she would sometimes take a quiet moment to flip through old photos. Whenever she saw images of Frank laughing with the kids, a soft smile would appear on her lips, an expression of genuine love for her family. But when she accidentally came across photos of Frank in his youth, time seemed to rewind, bringing her back to those passionate early days of their relationship. Back then, she was full of life and fire, chasing dreams with stars in her eyes. She still remembered how Frank once dreamed of moving to Paris, living a free and romantic life. But those dreams had withered in the soil of reality. The weight of everyday life and the dull grind of work had worn him down, dulling his passion for life. She couldn't help but feel a tinge of regret over the changes in her husband. At the same time, a strong desire surged within her to rekindle their passion for life. She longed to rediscover that original spark, and hand in hand with him, breathe new life into their marriage. And so, deep in her heart, she quietly made a bold decision. When Frank came home from work, April greeted him with 2 glasses of red wine, her eyes full of excitement as she rushed over to his side. Then she told him that they had saved quite a bit of money, enough to support the whole family for 6 months, even if neither of them worked. If they sold the house and the car, they'd have even more. Frank looked puzzled and asked, "But if we sell the house, where would we live?"
Paris.
April's response caught him off guard. She explained that instead of living a dull and passionless life here, it was better to follow their hearts and chase the dreams they once had, like moving to Paris, just like they talked about when they were young. Frank, however, didn't think it was realistic. What if we can't find jobs over there? How would we survive?
You won't be getting any kind of a job. Because I will.
He couldn't help but let out a faint, dismissive smile. But April's expression turned serious. She explained that secretarial positions in European government offices paid quite well, more than enough to support a family. Frank shook his head and asked, "If you're the one working, what am I supposed to do? I can't just sit at home doing nothing."
You'll have the time and the freedom to start doing it.
April's words stirred something in him, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt she was being naive. To him, as someone from the working class, a life of hard labor was an inescapable fate. Chasing youthful dreams now just felt like a fantasy.
Our whole existence here is based on this great premise that we're special and superior to the whole thing. But we're not. We're just like everyone else. Look at us. We've bought into the same ridiculous delusion. This idea that you have to resign from life and settle down the moment you have children. And we've been punishing each other for it.
Still, as he listened to April's heartfelt and sincere persuasion, Frank fell deep into thought. Maybe deep down, he agreed with her more than he wanted to admit. But the years had worn down his edges, and the confidence and ambition of his youth had long since faded. The unknown still filled him with anxiety and doubt.
Listen to me. You're the most beautiful and wonderful thing in the world. You're a man.
And yet, her encouragement felt like a burst of spring sunlight, thawing his long frozen heart. It cleared the gloom from his mind and planted a small seed of hope within him. So much so that the next morning, his mood at work had completely changed. He walked with a spring in his step, whistling as he strolled past his boss. His heart had already flown to Paris. He couldn't wait to leave. At the same time, April, beaming with joy, went to the embassy to begin the immigration process. In 2 months, they'd be in Paris, ready to start a new chapter filled with freedom and excitement. But Frank's co-workers were baffled. They all thought he already had a life worth envying. Why take such a huge risk for the unknown? The whole thing seemed rushed and impulsive. Even the neighbors, who smiled and congratulated them in public, gossiped behind their backs, saying they'd regret the decision soon enough. Frank and April, however, didn't care. They believed that those who had never soared, those content to flutter under rooftops like sparrows and swallows, could never understand the courage and determination it took to chase the sky like a swan. From then on, their marriage revived like a withered tree in spring. For Frank, coming home became the highlight of his day. And every evening, April would drop everything to greet him with a warm hug and a loving kiss. That once broken relationship now seemed like a thing of the past. Their home was filled once again with laughter and joy. But fate, as always, had other plans. Just when Frank had finally let go of his doubts and embraced their dream, his boss called him into the office for a private meeting. He praised Frank's recent performance. His renewed energy had not only boosted the company's profits, but also inspired the leadership team. As a result, the company had decided to promote him and give him a raise, even offering him the position of branch manager. Frank was stunned. The opportunity he had dreamed of for years had suddenly become a reality. Over lunch, his boss told him in a serious tone, "You don't get many chances like this in life. If you let it slip away, someone else will grab it, and you'll be left with nothing." Those words made Frank waver. Was the life he dreamed of in Paris really as perfect as he imagined? He thought about telling April everything, but before he could, she told him she was pregnant again. Frank knew a new baby would bring even more uncertainty and challenge to their already complex plans. April was just as troubled. She feared the pregnancy would completely derail everything they had hoped for. Faced with this sudden news, Frank, already torn with indecision, felt even more overwhelmed and lost. Maybe under the weight of daily life, he had never truly had the freedom to choose at all. To ease April's anxiety and buy himself some time to think, Frank told her they'd figure it out together. The next day, he took the family and some neighbors on a trip to the beach. While chatting casually, he accidentally let slip in front of April that he'd been offered a big promotion. April was clearly caught off guard. She instantly understood what Frank's comment really meant. When Frank came over to her later, she didn't hold back and asked directly if he was thinking of backing out. Frank didn't answer directly. He gave her a vague reply saying, "It's just another option. With more money, we can have a better life. Paris isn't the only way forward." What Frank didn't understand was that for April, it had never been just about Paris. It was about escaping a life that had become suffocating and mundane. In the end, Frank chose to compromise with reality. He stayed behind and accepted the promotion. After that, their relationship once again fell into a deadlock. Just like before, they were constantly at odds. April often criticized Frank, accusing him of going back on his word, of lacking the courage to take risks or make a change. But Frank felt deeply wronged. He knew everything he endured was for the sake of their family's stability and happiness. No matter how dull or soul-crushing the job was, he had never once slacked off. Maybe it was April's words that left Frank at a loss for how to respond, or maybe he simply didn't want to continue a pointless argument. He locked himself in the bathroom to cool down, splashing cold water on his face, only to stumble upon a hidden abortion kit tucked away in the closet. That discovery sparked another heated argument. What started as questioning quickly escalated into bitter confrontation and eventually mutual emotional wounds.
A normal woman, a normal sane mother doesn't buy a piece of rubber tubing to give herself an abortion so she can live out some kind of a goddamn fantasy. And I think it's about time we found somebody to help make some sense of your life.
And the new job's gonna pay for that too?
If you need a shrink, it will be paid for. Obviously.
April finally realized that the vibrant, idealistic version of Frank she once knew was gone for good. The last shred of hope she had for escaping their stagnant life had been extinguished. The fire that once fueled her dream of a better life flickered out in the cold winds of disappointment. Seeing the despair in her eyes, Frank was overcome with guilt and sorrow. He knelt down beside her and gently tried to comfort her. After that, life seemed to settle back into its familiar routine.
I can make you happy here. I promise.
Frank continued working to support the family while April stayed home all day, doing laundry, cooking, caring for the kids. But the light in her eyes had faded. One weekend evening, their neighbors, the Sheps, invited them out to a bar to relax. But no matter how lively the atmosphere, April just couldn't enjoy herself. Frank asked her to dance, but she turned him down, right in front of everyone. Midway through the night, Millie suddenly felt unwell. Their car was blocked in at the parking lot, so Frank had no choice but to take his own car and drive Millie home first. But after Frank left, April suddenly perked up. She even took the initiative to ask Shep for a dance. As the music built up, April let go completely, as if driven by some invisible force. Through each wild movement, she poured out her anger, frustration, and longing for freedom. And after the dancing, she and Shep went down to the beach, briefly giving in to a moment of passion. April knew this wasn't about physical desire, nor did she have real feelings for Shep. Maybe she was just trying to use this as a way to numb the emptiness and pain inside her, to feel, even briefly, the sense of being wanted. Maybe it was even a subconscious way of getting back at Frank for his betrayal. But no matter the reason, it was a hollow fix, like drinking poison to quench thirst. It couldn't ease her pain, nor solve the root of her emotional struggle. Perhaps driven by guilt, or maybe in a last-ditch effort to save their marriage, Frank finally confessed to April. He admitted that during a period of deep frustration, he'd had an affair with a female co-worker, but insisted it was over and asked for forgiveness. April's reaction stunned him.
Is it supposed to make me jealous or something?
In other words, you don't care what I do or who I or anything,
No. I guess that's right, I don't.
She was already seething with rage. Now, she was completely falling apart. She had waited day after day under the same suffocating roof, silently hoping Frank would become the one to save her. But instead, he betrayed her, and now stood there trying to cover his sin with empty words and self-righteous justification. Her heart surged with a mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, helplessness, and a sorrow too deep to express. Frank couldn't bear her coldness. He chased after her, trying to defend himself, saying he'd spent all these years working hard to support the family, suffering quietly just to provide them with a stable life. But April said she had been held hostage by morality for 7 years. When would it ever end? Seeing her spiral out of control, Frank tried to hold her, to calm her down, but was met with even harsher words. Their fight was no longer just about love or betrayal. It had become a clash of ideologies. April used the Paris Plan to challenge the traditional mold of what a woman was expected to be. She wanted to break free from the cage of middle-class values. Frank, on the other hand, was trapped in the role of the respectable provider, using a sense of duty to mask his own confusion and sense of failure. Their conflict wasn't just a personal crisis. It reflected a deeper contradiction in modern life: material comfort versus spiritual emptiness. When two hearts fall out of sync, even the closest partners can feel like strangers living in separate worlds. Their arguments turned into monologues. Words were no longer bridges. They became weapons, slicing into each other's most vulnerable places. But no one was truly listening to the fear and loneliness behind those words. As the one who gradually fell silent in this battle, April felt powerless to change the situation and could only escape alone into the woods outside their home. Even as the sky darkened, she refused to return to that place that no longer felt like home. Frank stood by the window watching her figure disappear into the shadows, his heart full of confusion and helplessness. He longed to mend their relationship, but the moment he thought of all the obstacles standing between them, he instinctively pulled back. In the end, he turned to alcohol, hoping to numb himself and escape reality. But deep down, he knew the rift between him and his wife might never be healed. The next morning, Frank was about to leave for work as usual when he heard a familiar sound coming from the kitchen. It was April, making breakfast. She greeted Frank with a warm smile and a cheerful, "Good morning," as if nothing had ever happened. This sudden shift unsettled Frank. He forced an awkward smile as he sat down at the table, unsure of what to say. He wanted to ask if she had come to terms with everything, but didn't dare bring up the thing that had caused her so much pain. Sensing his unease, April gently reassured him. She thanked him for everything he had done for their family and told him she was truly happy for the success he had found in his career. The tension slowly eased. Frank began to relax and even opened up, proudly sharing details about his new job. Before leaving, he gave her a loving kiss, a rare display of tenderness. He looked genuinely happy, believing April had finally become the woman he had always hoped for. With that comfort in his heart, he headed off to work. But as his car disappeared down the road, April's smile vanished. Her facade crumbled, and she broke down in tears. Still, she pushed through the pain, cleaning the dishes and tidying up the kitchen like nothing had happened. Then she called her mother, asking her to help take care of the children. After the call, April retrieved the abortion tools she had hidden away long ago. She laid towels across the bathroom floor, brought in the sterilized instruments, and quietly undressed. No one would ever know what kind of resolve she summoned in that bathroom, or what kind of agony she endured. Sometime later, she slowly made her way downstairs, every step heavy and deliberate. When she appeared at the window again, her face was pale, completely drained of color. And yet, in that moment, she felt lighter, relieved, at peace. But the procedure didn't go as she had hoped. Her body was racked with pain, and the bleeding wouldn't stop. Maybe it was the fear of dying. Maybe it was the desire to leave this world with some dignity.
Need help? 115 Revolutionary Road.
But in the end, she picked up the phone and called for an ambulance. By the time Frank arrived at the hospital, it was too late. April had lost too much blood. The doctors couldn't save her. The news of her death shattered Frank. He ran through the streets like a madman, the carefully crafted image of the respectable husband completely shattered. The sting of wind in his throat was nothing compared to the storm of regret tearing through his chest. All the slammed doors, the cold silences, the cruel dismissals of her Paris dream, now they all came back to him like knives. Their story reminds us that only honest communication can break the prison of performance in a marriage. April's Paris plan never came true, but like a stone cast into still water, it sent ripples through the stagnant norms they lived by. Frank staggered through his confusion, but in the rubble of their life together, he finally glimpsed the possibility of change. This story strips away the polished veneer of middle-class life, not to leave us in despair, but to awaken our longing for a different way to live. True revolution doesn't always mean leaving everything behind. It can mean reconstructing everyday life with raw honesty and heart. Societal norms may forge the chains that bind us, but personal awakening is always free. April's final act and Frank's internal battle both prove the same thing. The answer isn't escape, it's the courage to face life head-on. And perhaps that's the true takeaway from their story. That even after recognizing the absurdity of it all, we still have the power to plant something new, something brave and full of love in the ruins.